Tim, I would love to have you do an introduction, and then let's dive into this topic.
Thanks, Bobby. It's great to be here. Great to see you again, Brent. Tim Deneen, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Management Research Services, and we have a platform, a SaaS-based, no-code, API-centric new business and automated underwriting platform. Very similar to the story that Benekiva has, our platform was built out of experience. MRS has been around for a long time, over 34 years now. And when myself and the co-founders acquired MRS, we had a vision to build a better tool. And really to build a better tool to harness the domain knowledge that we had internally, but also that the industry has, and to give them a tool to really harness that knowledge to expedite and propel and innovate, be flexible in the new business and automated underwriting side of the house.
Perfect. So I'm going to ask Brent this question because when we built Benekiva and when we were diving into retention, we called it Brent's baby. So let's talk about what is the impact when carriers aren't considering a claim as a revenue driver from your advisor lens.
Yeah, I shared some of the stories earlier, and I've got countless stories that we could talk about the claims process. And I've always said from the beginning that, and I actually challenge upper executives at carrier organizations. I would always say, go through your claim process, and I guarantee you will make changes. Because once you've gone through the experience as an actual policyholder or beneficiary, you will make changes. But then it's about saying, okay, we want to give them this Amazon-type claims experience, but now how do we retain and capture the assets? I spoke about the research that we did prior to writing one line of code in Benekiva. One part of that research was we found nationwide, on average, when a death claim check is cut, less than 3 to 4% of those assets come back into the organization. And when you look at the process, one, you send them through a terrible claims process. They get the old check in the mail. They deposit it at Wells Fargo, US Bank, whatever their bank is, and then all of a sudden, every other advisor from your competitors are saying, what are we going to do with this money? And that money goes to those other competitors. So the thought process was, if you could provide that Amazon-type claims experience, you will have the opportunity, not the guarantee, the opportunity to serve and potentially retain these assets. But in order to do that, as part of the claim process, we have to capture some of the suitability and underwriting type data questions in order to provide that product mix at time of claim payment. That product mix can be specified as a payment option, for example. Instead of, give them 3 options. Check is in the mail, or option A, you might put some assets in a deferred annuity with guaranteed future income, some in another life insurance policy, or option C, any of those things, plus a couple college savings accounts, but you're getting the opportunity to at least retain those assets. Here's what I know. If you don't give them the Amazon-type claims experience, and you give them a terrible claims experience in the first place, you will not have the opportunity to retain those assets. They will go to your competitors. So as part of that process, we said, we need to make sure that we have the ability to run through the claims process and then go through the actual new business process as an extension of that claim.
So Tim, we know from a technology perspective, this is feasible. So why aren't carriers there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bobby. It's probably very multi-layered too. We could probably have a whole nother panel on the why there.
Quickly.
But, I think it comes down to timing, right? So much investment from the carriers has been on the front end, and rightfully so, to drive new business sales, new business acquisition, and new business processing, with the underwriting being a key role of that. Technology, too. Carriers are in a lot of instances hamstrung by those mainframe, by those legacy technologies. And with the advent of platforms like Benekiva and MRS, that's now not becoming such a hindrance, right? And so as that continues to evolve and the opportunity presents itself, I think And as new business has progressed here, and we're seeing a lot of advancement there, and as the claim side catches up, because you're absolutely right, Brent. When I first met you a few years ago, I specifically remember that statement. There is no better lead in the life insurance industry than the beneficiary, but you have to provide that Amazon-type experience for you to take advantage of that opportunity. So, we just need to start. We need to try. We have the tools at our disposal to fail fast and really give this a shot and see where we can take this. Because that statistic you threw out is amazing. Less than 4% of the claims that go out are retained by the carrier, and that's a huge opportunity to only add to the revenue driver of a carrier.
Yeah, we're seeing a key theme in this conference: just get started. So Brent, when we talk about, you explained a little bit of the ideal state. So if technology isn't let's keep technology aside, what additional insights could we paint in that ideal state flow?
Yeah, I think it goes back to Lisa's point earlier, even on the new business or retention side, there is an opportunity for the human element. So we're not saying that, you run the claim through the claim process and they click a button and they have new policies, right? You can have that. We've proven that, right? For some policies, that makes 100% perfect sense. But for other type of policies, you may want to loop in that advisor to help guide them and help run through, more advanced suitability questions. But I think there is a balance between both. It's about looking at the products that you have in your mix and saying, okay, these products over here, we can retain the assets by, for lack of a better term, robo-advising, right? We're just gonna go through take the data that we get from the claims, external data sources, maybe our propensity to buy models, et cetera, and we're gonna say this person qualifies for these types of products. And then just offer that up as part of the payment option, right? Instead of having just one payment option of check is in the mail, have a couple payment options. But then always have the ability to loop that human being into the scenario when needed. Because if you present me with 3 options, and typically, statistically, they say you put 3 options in front of people, they'll pick the middle one. But if I pick the middle one and I have questions, I need to be able to get that question answered very quickly and rapidly. And that's where the human element comes in, where we loop in an advisor or maybe route it to a call center and start that human element type process. But the whole point is, if you don't solve this piece over here, you can't even talk about the retention side. You really need to solve this first before you look at potentially retaining assets. Now, with that said, I've always said from day one, Benekiva will be an uber successful company doing claims and servicing. But Benekiva goes to a whole new level when we start retaining assets. Because at that point, I would literally give that part of the platform to the carrier. Just give us part of the commission. Guess what? I'm licensed. I can do that. Right? So the possibilities are endless when you start looking at this as a holistic journey and say, look, let's take this expense on the balance sheet and drive revenue. We often hear from claims staff, it's hard for me to get funding for claims. Why? Because it's a back burner item. It's something we always want to fix, but it's hard to get funding. But when you look at it from this perspective and say, imagine with me that if we gave this Amazon-type claims experience, and all of a sudden, instead of less than 3% of those assets leaving the organization and we're retaining 10%, what is the possibility of that? Now, all of a sudden, the system just paid for itself. To me, I would argue, from an executive perspective, you kind of can't not look at that. Absolutely.
So Tim, to wrap up, and before we do our big announcement here, how do carriers achieve that? Like, what is your advice to them?
Well, I think going back to the theme of the summit here so far is you got to start, right? And with the tools that are available, I think you were mentioning this morning, no one workflow is the same in the carrier's mind, right? And with the tools that are available, we can accommodate that. And in addition to that, that frictionless process, it doesn't have to be an automated underwriting solution on the spot without talking to advisor. But if you pass that process down to advisor, it's got to work. Right? It's got to work. And that's the beauty of this is, we've been on kind of the opposite ends of the technology ecosystem, Brent, but we've had the same philosophy, no custom code, configurable, no code, to be able to harness the domain knowledge that we retain to meet the needs of each specific workflow and each specific carrier, and more importantly, to fail fast. It's not a big overhead. It's not a big expense to try something. If it doesn't work, so what? Well, now we know that doesn't work. Let's try the plan B here. And that continuous iteration and that continuous improvement, leveraging the modern technology platforms that we have, is key to driving the success. And so that'd be, again, bringing this back to the theme so far is you have to start. You don't need a waterfall approach. Let's start small with a simple product, expand the products from there, and work with the advisors, interview the new business in Slane. It's interesting. We were having, when we were prepping for this, we were having this conversation. I work a lot with new business and underwriting. You guys work with claims. Never in my experience have I heard the new business and underwriting talk about the claims experience. They don't know, so let's make that full circle and bring it together and try.
I call it the circle of life.
Circle of life.
So with that, we're going to take a few minutes and just really announce our exciting partnership. A couple of comments, Brent and Tim.
Yeah, to Tim's point, him and I have been talking for a few years, and we often have these insurance conversations, and we've both been in the industry many, many years, and so when we have these conversations about the art of the possible, it's when we start, we're the type of companies that we can try this. Right? And I said, why not just try it? Put the two platforms together, see what happens, and let's try it. And so I think you'll be pleased with what you'll see here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, it's not a lot of overhead to try it, right? That fail fast mentality. We think it's a winner. Brent's been talking about this literally since the first day I met him about 5 years ago. So we're finally in a position to give this a shot, and I think it's going to be amazing with the front end experience that you have with your claimants and our back end processing capabilities and underwriting technology. So
we're going to give a sneak peek into this process. So when we talk about the claims value chain, we're trying to figure out at what nuggets can we, at a claim cycle, start to form that beneficiary engagement. And we're focused on the claims, right? So there's plenty of opportunities and other servicing types of flows, but we're focused on the claims. So beneficiary engagement at a time of claim intake, during workflow, so that we can understand their needs and wants. We also need to make sure that we are set up to handle flexible disbursement. So if a beneficiary wants some of those proceeds to go into new business journey, let's offer that. So if they want portion of it in check, portion of it funneled through new business, let's do that. And then, from a new business perspective, let's loop in best-in-class automated underwriting and decision engine so that as you're going through this process, disbursements occurred, I've started a new business flow, I'm getting underwriting, automated underwriting as much as possible and decision at that time. So when you look at Benekiva and MRS combined, we really are, what we're building is claims to revenue gateway. So with that, we've got a couple of demo that we want to just walk through what this process really looks like. So let's imagine this. So from an intake perspective, this is a claim intake. So a claimant is going to come in, they're going to start this process. And what you will see here is, as they're inputting their information, from a settlement option, let's ask if they want to discuss options with their advisor, or if they've already made up their mind and have done the analysis, I want portion of my proceeds to go into the product. So that's one area of engagement. The second piece is, how do we make payouts easy? So this is a snippet of the Benekiva platform where, from a disbursement perspective, let's funnel what they want that they've shared with us in the beginning. Let's flow that through new business process of what they want. And the remainder, let's give them the option of how they want that money to be held. And in this scenario, they want an EFT. So now when you look at the new business flow, so payments have been dispersed, and now that beneficiary is asked to complete that new business flow because you still have to go through underwriting. So when you look at that, this is where, this is an example of a final expense application. They're completing their information, and they're doing the HIPAA authorization, so we can start to pull the medical information. They're doing a sign-off. They're being presented with, basically, we're completing all of these needed processes and all automatically through one single interface. So now, when you look at how do we start to integrate MRS decision engine into this flow, into this new business flow. So what you will see here is a typical flow. I've completed, I've done my HIPAA, I've done my COVID questions, if that's a disclosure that you want. And now what you will see is underwriting related questions. So for example, do you have a form of diabetes? And I've selected no. This is where the engine is coming back and sharing, hey, we saw this in a medical file. We saw that you went to this doctor and you got this prescription. And now we start to collect true information because we're getting that from the underwriting engine. And then we can ask questions like, hey, when did you see Dr. Smith? What was your AC1 reading, as an example?
And that's really key, Bobby. I mean, to be able to provide that Amazon-type experience. And again, when we say automated underwriting, automated to the extent that the carrier needs it or wants it, right? So to be able to control that workflow at that point in time is really key with that constant API communication to really be able to provide that Amazon-type experience.
So now from a payment perspective, the user's sharing, okay, I want, this is the face amount that I'm applying for. And once again, giving them the option of where the source of the funds coming from. So for example, death benefit proceeds. And so now, at this point, they have been approved. So now they're seeing, I've been approved, congratulations, they've got this benefit value, and how do they want that, the policy documentation to them? Do they want it electronically emailed, or do they want mail copy? And then they have a confirmation screen. So thanking them, they can print this for their records.
One thing that's important to note here is, as part of the Benekiva platform, we've connected to multiple admin systems. And, I've been in this industry 20 plus years, and I remember when some of the automated, iPipelines, things like that came out, and, it digitizes one small portion of the overall value, but then it goes into the carrier and it's a manual process from there. A carrier now has to create the policy on the admin system, launch the new policy process, and what we said was, gosh, we're already connected to these admin systems. We're doing push and pull type processes with these admin systems. Could we just launch a new policy on the admin system on behalf of a human being? And the answer is yes. The technology allows you to do that. So by doing this type of scenario, you can actually have that new business process truly be a end-to-end new business process where very limited human interaction to do those manual type processes like launching a new policy on the admin system. The technology can do that for you. And then loop in the human being whenever you feel like that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I'd add for very low overhead these days, right? Because it's all configurable now these days. And that's key because that completes your circle of life, Bobby.